What the Speak, Episode 2. Is this thing on?
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
If you've never seen the story behind how and why the What the Speak podcast got started, visit whatthespeak.com/speakbetter to watch the 90-second video. If you like what you see, send the link to someone you know. My guest today is Chris Brogan, a New York Times bestselling author of books like The Impact Equation and Trust Agents. Chris is CEO and president of Human Business Works, a publishing and media company, and is a sought-after keynote speaker who has addressed crowds of thousands, as well as being featured on the Dr. Phil Show. Chris's presentation style is something that is completely unique to who he is as an individual, and I had to talk to him to find out why he does what he does. What he shares are golden nuggets, so be sure to bust out your notepads. Well, Chris, it is awesome to have you here today. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to diving into our discussion.
Couldn't be any happier, Brian. Thanks for having me by.
You bet. So, Chris, I compiled a list of things that people say when they describe you as a speaker. So here's what I've got. They call you engaging, authentic, unpretentious, approachable, charismatic, kind-natured, and giving.
Okay, I'll own all of those.
Those
are all pretty good.
Now, I personally look at you as the anti-professional speaker. And I say that because you're 100% authentic. You're completely Chris Brogan, and there's nobody like you. You know, you don't come across as kind of the swarmy guy in a suit that gets up with this really polished, I guess, inauthentic approach to speaking. You get up there and you are who you are, and I absolutely love it. So what I want to do is dive into how you do what you do. So are you ready?
Go.
All right. The first thing I wanted to ask you is how much preparation and planning do you put into a presentation before you go on stage?
So my process is a little different than some, which is that I try to take the lion's share of what domain knowledge I have. So first off, I guess one of the benefits of what I do is I tend to talk about the thing I actually know about and have done, which makes it a little easier than some speakers who are talking about things that they've observed or that they feel that they can narrate in an interesting way. So I almost never fall into any particular cliff because I've been there. And so if the audience seems to go left, then I can go left. I don't have to just keep down my narrative. So that's one piece of the puzzle. Another piece of prep work, though, is I start to pay attention to what exactly the audience is doing and wants ahead of time. So I'll ask them if I have access to them via social networks, for instance. I will ask people ahead of time. Like I love to get to the venue ahead of the speech so that I can talk to people and say, hey, you know, what's bothering you that's not at this event? Or, you know, when you come back to your desk, what's going to make you forget everything you heard here? And then I'll use that to really try to triangulate what's going on specifically to the people in the room, which is a little different than other folks too. Now, I used to do 100% custom speech every single time, and I found that that's a little crazy. That's sort of like putting together an orchestra, you know, every single performance. And I think that what works best now is it's almost like what modern DJs do. I have a bunch of packets of information that I want to share. I just mix them in a specific way for the room, and then I add in the very specifics of what the room needs. And so I'd say that's about as close to I can get to explaining that performance method.
No, that's great. I mean, the beautiful thing about it is that you're very much focused on getting as in tune with the audience that you're speaking before, which I think, you know, a lot of folks who do speaking, you know, they make a lot of assumptions, and I think it's good to hear how you go about that process of trying to really find out what exactly they're there to hear you speak about.
You can only get it wrong a few times before you realize, boy, I better pay better attention. I mean, I can tell you there's one event where I misread or misheard what I was going to be, you know, to whom was I speaking. And as I walked towards the place where I was speaking, I walked through the vendors area, you know, where all the different people selling this or that had a booth. Yeah. And I realized, I'm almost essentially in the wrong conference. Like I'm walking into a room and I'm about to speak in about 8 minutes to the wrong audience, meaning I'm sure they think they're the right audience. I had prepared for someone else. So the slides, because I don't like to use slides, but I had some, did not reflect very well on what I had to say. So I had to tell a story. It was sort of like playing the movie Fight Club and talking about cooking the whole time.
Right.
There's this going on, and then there's me talking, and the two didn't exactly connect.
Well, that leads me to my next question. I know you've been kind of noted for being able to make an adjustment almost on the fly with kind of where the audience is at. Can you share a little bit more on how you do that kind of quickly on a dime? Is it because you've got these packets of things that you've prepared and you can kind of weave them in, or how do you go about that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely related to the fact of having the domain knowledge, to say that I've done all the stuff that I'm talking about. So if the audience seems a little less interested about X, then I can talk a little more about Y. I spend a real lot of time harmonizing and trying to really figure out, if I were this person and if I were sitting here forced by the boss or something to be there, what do I really need to take away? And I grade myself on heads dropping down in notebooks writing. To me, that is my judgment. I don't care what they write on the card afterwards, because either they're being polite or they hate me or whatever. Neither one helps me. I only measure head down notebook, because to me, I just told them something they might think is useful. Because I don't think, I might be utterly wrong, Brian, I don't think someone goes, what a jerk. Like, I think they just think that one. So in my mind, at least if they're writing it, I've done something correctly, or I've baffled them enough that they're going to go Google something later. I'll take it either way. The other thing that I guess I can do to make it turn on a dime is, if I see people start to glaze, like if I'm talking about a technology type thing, or if I'm talking about something that is really big in my world, but then their eyes all start to flutter off and they start thinking about, I wonder when lunch is, I can then immediately pull them in with a story. I can pull them in with a tone of voice change. These tools that the pros use. I don't call myself that, but I would say that what I've come to learn is these tools work. So if I get really loud, everyone will turn and look at me, even if I just said, wow, I have to go to the bathroom. And, that's, I guess, why people call me, authentic and genuine, is because I talk about poop on stage. But, beyond that, it's basically, I learned it from a philosopher known as Mary Poppins. She said, just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Yeah. And so that's what I do. I say something funny, and then I say something useful, and you're still thinking of the funny thing, and then you'll remember the useful thing, one hopes.
Well, another thing that you're really a master at is engaging the audience right out of the get-go. I mean, I've seen it where immediately you walk on stage and people just start laughing, or you make a comment. Is this natural, or is this something that you've worked on honing to bring humor into your presentation?
Oh, so humor. I had the beautiful opportunity, this very visionary, often misunderstood guy named Lauren Feldman had an event called the Audience Conference, and he made it half marketing idiots like me and half professional comics. And he held it at Caroline Stage in New York City, which is the stage that broke guys like Jay Leno, and I think Seinfeld had some work there. I mean, there's a lot of names on that stage. I remember seeing it in the background, and I thought, wow, I'm going to get a chance to talk in this very, vaunted place for comics. And I've always loved comedy. So I thought, wow, I better do some work. So I did some prep, and I started watching every comic's work that was going to be on the stage, so I at least, was in some kind of a harmony with them. And then I realized a few things. One is that they're not spontaneous at all. Most comics, they work on their bit over and over again. And I wish I could, but I have no memory. I cannot memorize a single thing. My head is full of, really obscure movie and video game references, and I'm really good with names and faces. I have no idea where I parked. If you asked me not to look down and tell you what I'm wearing, I've got nothing. So I have to do improv comedy. So what I do most times is I'll either take some weird arrangement of something that comes from my own life and make it funny enough that people laugh, or I'll make some kind of a comment very specific to what's gone on during that day. And people love laughing at relevance or laughing at seeing themselves in something. Yeah. And so what my pathetic attempts at humor are really essentially just pulling directly into people's emotional trigger points. It's like a massage therapist knowing exactly where to poke their thumbs. I do that with humor. And again, like I say, Brian, what I came to realize after that event was, wow, funny works in this really different level than just plain prose speaking. And so it's way different than those people that walk in and they make some awful canned joke that they're doing because they've been told, if I do this, then I'll get rapport. Yep. But that's not the same. I mean, that's the same as like pushing up a YouTube video and saying, I think people are watching me right now. What I do instead is if I can draw people right from the audience immediately into the story, and it could be something as dumb as just looking down, seeing somebody I know and saying, hi, Gene. People start to realize that. That's, I guess, what I'm struggling against the most, Brian. The reason I try to work on comedy is, comedy pulls you in and lets you know you're really in the room. Quite often I'll make the joke, I really am not a YouTube video. I'm really here. And I'm stunned, sometimes because we're such a lean back society.
Yeah.
It takes me a lot of times to get somebody to warm up to that belief.
Great. Well, you talked a little bit earlier, just a moment ago, about how you don't really like to use slides. And I've seen you use absolutely no slides. I've also seen you use minimal amounts of slides. Can you talk about your philosophy behind that and kind of why you take that approach?
So there's two real reasons. One is pure ego. I want people to look at me. If I put slides up, they'll look at the slides. I could say nothing for 65 seconds and the room would be going, waiting for the slide to switch. Right. And that drives me insane. So I've decided that's not good enough. And then the second thing is, if I don't have slides and if I notice the room needs me to go left instead of right, I can do that better. But if the next slide is talking about why Facebook is stupid, then I pretty much have to say what the slide said or be in jeopardy. I did that fairly recently. I was at an event where I really wanted to talk about something and I just sent them my slides. And there's this, what an inside bit. Well, I'm glad your show's about what it's about. So I like to send PDF files because what I find is that if they don't have the font I have or if they've set their computer up in some different way, it gets all messy. And I'm so rarely angry about things, especially about presenting. But I pop open my slides at this event fairly recently, and it's like Arial font. And everything's messed up and everything's blown all over because they demanded a PowerPoint. Yeah. And I just knew it was going to not work. And I opened it up and I looked at it and I said, and I hit the space bar 20 times and shut the laptop lid and kept talking. And so to me, that's what goes wrong with slides. But the other thing that goes wrong with slides is we, the presenter, become far too enamored of our methods. We get too good at it. And there's few exceptions. One of my favorite speakers in the world is Mitch Joel. Mitch Joel can make slides sing. Yeah. Seth Godin does pretty okay, they say. And I would say that there's a few others, Nancy Duarte, of course, who basically, lives to make good slides. But beyond that, there's a lot of people who are really enamored with the screen and the clicker, who I don't think could hold their own. And I want to tell you one last really personal story about that. I was at an event in Phoenix where Howard Lindzen, who runs StockTwits and a bunch of other things, was. And Howard and I knew him from back in 2007, and I had once said something kind of mean to him at an event. And I was sort of teasing, like that's how I'm like a boy pushing a girl at age 11 or something. And I think he didn't like me afterwards or whatever, but didn't matter. I didn't have much of an opinion of him either. And then at this event, he's going on and his second slide is on and then the projector explodes or something. And he just shuts the lid and goes. And I was like, wow, like I can do that, but very few people do it. I was just like, ooh, I have respect for you. And I've had such a high opinion of him ever since then, just because it's so rare that someone has the domain knowledge to not actually read along from their slides, that if I gave any giant piece of advice leaving this thing, master your content and you'll never have to worry about the format.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, so we've got just a couple minutes left here, and I wanted to ask you about how you weave, stories from your personal life as well as observations, into your presentation. And also, you've got this really great approach that I love. It's almost like you have a thought that pops in your head and you say it, and then you bring it back to the content that you're delivering. Can you talk us through that process?
There's a really interesting documentary called It Might Get Loud, and it's Jack White from the White Stripes, it is The Edge from U2, and it is Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin getting together and just talking guitars and all that. And early on in the very beginning, it shows Jack White making a guitar basically with like a nail and some string and a Coke bottle and an electrical cord, and there's cows and crap walking around in the background, and it's contrived, but it's also pretty cool. And in this documentary, Jack White talks about his very favorite guitar is like this guitar he bought at Sears or Montgomery Ward or something like that. And he still plays it to this day. And what he says is it breaks out of tune all the time. You have to fight with it to get the notes you really want. And it is a beast to play on stage. And he goes, and that's why I love it. I love not being able to control this thing, and it keeps me fresh. Yep. And so it's rare that, you know, by the way, that was me telling a story to weave it into the speech. It's rare that I get the opportunity to do something, you know, extemporaneous and spontaneous. So my speaking opportunities, I love the opportunity to throw something out there like a Jack White story and tie it back to the request, which was, how do I explain how I do that and why? So this is the meta of what you just asked me, because you said, why do you do it or how do you do it? That's how I do it. Yep. And why I do it is because I love the opportunity to sort of fly without a net. You know, there's so much of our life that we try to prepare for. But if you can embrace what's not necessarily known, then bigger things happen out of it, the big opportunities. Now, you could fall on your head, it turns out. But if you could be even vaguely interesting and funny about how you fall, you know, I have this nearly ADD personality. And so having some kind of a skeleton, like I almost always write down a sort of a frame underneath me, so that I don't even know what I just held up, but there's a nearly naked woman on the back of it. Oh, it was a card. It was a business card. And on the front, it's these bracelets that you're supposed to wear. But I just held up this picture.
Nice.
That'll go good in your videos.
It will go good.
Put that photo as the grab.
Right.
So no, you could fall down, and I think it's exciting to figure out how you're going to get back up again. And if you do it in a way that's useful to the community that you're in front of and the audience that you're in front of, it's accepted and actually kind of praised. It's really funny when I read my reviews, which I never recommend doing. But what I read is, it's a split. It's either, wow, you're really funny and I learned more than I thought I would, or I really don't like you and I don't like your style and I have no interest in you ever coming back to this event.
Right.
And I love that, because the last thing I would want is every single card that came back to say proficient at what he did and I felt I was taught adequately.
Right.
I want love and I want hate. You can't really own either one. I mean, you can't discard the hate and hold on to the love, because if you played only for the love, then you're never going to work hard enough. And I would say that it's sort of my Buddhist leanings, but it's served me really well to just kind of work for my own efforts and my own standards, which is just this: did I deliver enough notebook moments that the audience thinks, okay, I didn't really waste that time? And if I didn't, did I at least make you laugh half the way through?
Yeah. Well, one last question out of curiosity. The Chris Brogan who's speaking today and booking opportunities to get in front of an audience, is it the same Chris Brogan that, you know, a handful of years ago when you first started doing this? You know, have you grown? Have you changed? Have you evolved as a speaker?
Wow, I hope so. I really do. In 07 and 06 and whatever, when I was really kind of putting my shingle out as a pro speaker, I was just as amazed as anybody was at some certain places I was invited to speak. I have this sort of stunned look when I'm on the stage. You know, I spoke for Disney. I spoke in all these places where I'm like, I can't believe I'm here. I followed Kathy Ireland onto a stage once at Disney. So she was kind of opening for me. And I'm just thinking, in what universe is this true? She's made well over $1 billion on her own. Like, by the way, pretty doesn't always just make money. Like, she was a model. She made her modeling money, but then she started a company and made $1 billion. I haven't made $1 billion. So why did I get to go after her? It's just because I could talk funnier. I don't know. That me that was then was just baffled. The me that's now has a little bit more professionalism. And actually, the other kind of thing that's changed is I'm a lot more fussy and picky about where I want to speak, because I think what I'm really trying hard to do is speak to audiences that will have some kind of, you know, will find a value in it more than just entertainment, but also that I'm not speaking inside baseball. Right. So I don't try anymore to go to, you know, my industry events. I find myself at places like car dealership events, glass blowing association, credit union, and I have way more fun with those people. I mean, my industry friends are wonderful, but what I love about them, Brian, is that they could give a rat's who I was. They just want to know, how am I going to make more money? What kind of business am I going to get done? And can you show me some of that? And as many times as I can make that answer yes, then I can live to fight another day.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thanks again for your time. It's been fantastic. Really appreciate you coming here to talk with us.
Mr. Kelly, it was a pleasure.
All right. If you liked what today's guest had to share in our discussion, you may want to grab an audio copy of their latest book for free by going to WTSaudiobook.com. That's WTSaudiobook.com.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whattospeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.